What's up, folks? What's up? What's up? What's up? What's happening? Welcome to another edition of The Loop. I am your host, DJ CEO. Um, as always, just, welcome to the show. This is a show that it's about culture, but not just about culture. It's about people that live and contribute and breathe the culture, and they understand it and they respect it, not just on a superficial level, but on a spiritual level. They go at it with a passion and a vigor because they love what they do and they love culture. They love their culture. And today, and I know it seems like I'm just having all my friends on the show, but the truth of the matter is just that all my friends are pretty damn cool. That's just what it comes down to. I'm just fortunate enough to have some dope ass friends. And one of today's guest is another DJ, an amazing DJ, and someone who I've respected in this game for a long time. We've been friends for a little over 10 years now.
Nice.
And we've been doing we've done some dope things together, and he has created some amazing moments, events, parties, trends, uh, just all aspects of the culture. So please welcome to the show my good friend DJ MoMa. Mo, what up, man?
Yo, 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 what's good, CEO? Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. And like I said, man, we've been friends for a while. I think the first time we really kind of connected, and I guess became like intimately aware of each other, was I think the first sweat party, if I'm correct.
I think that might be it. I mean, it's either that or something that Mancini did, but it was really right around that time.
It was right around that time, and I remember hearing you for the first time and going like, this guy right here, he has something. I've always told you you're like one of the most musical DJs I've ever been around.
Thanks, bro. I mean, that sounds like a compliment, man. I'll take it.
Yeah, now you are. It's like you play stuff, and I'm just like, it's either something that I forgot about, that's a surefire banger, that should stay in the rotation, or you're always introducing a new artist or a new sound or a new flavor in general, and that's what I appreciate so much about your approach to the culture.
Thanks,
You
G.
know, so we're gonna talk about a bunch of things today. We're gonna talk about DJing, of course. We're gonna talk about culture. We're going to talk about your heritage, and you being directly from the continent of Africa, from the motherland, and we're going to discuss that and how that has had a huge impact on your career and some of the decisions that you made.
Indeed.
Uh, so talk about so all right. So correct me because I always forget exactly which country are you from in Africa?
I'm from Sudan.
Sudan.
Sudan, which is in, East Africa, the Horn of Africa. And on my father's side, I have some Eritrean heritage as well, because
Okay.
my father's half Eritrean. He was actually born in Eritrea. But, so culturally, I'm Sudanese with some Eritrean heritage.
I always want to say Senegalese. I don't know why.
I think it's probably because it starts with an S
It
and it
has to
ends in
be.
an ESE. It rhymes, you know what I'm saying? Sudanese, Senegalese. And generally, both Sudanese and Senegalese people are kind of like mild mannered,
Hmm.
very modest society. When I say modest, I mean in like, the way people dress and the way they behave themselves. It's not as loud and brash as West African,
Hmm.
Nigerian, Ghanaian, etc. So listen, that's a common kind of like little confusion. It's not a big deal, man. We're all one and the same anyway.
So who has the best jollof? Answer that question.
Well, it's funny. The best jollof, the Nigerians and the Ghanaians, they kind of like monopolize that debate, right? But I think Senegalese people have the best jollof.
my
I've
my
been to
introduction to
Dakar a
jollof.
few times,
Yeah, my
and
introduction to
there's
jollof was the
jollof is
Senegalese
banging.
people. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
my introduction to jollof, and to me, Senegalese has the best jollof,
But
in my
again, that's
opinion.
part of their culture being very modest
Mm-hmm.
and mild mannered and non confrontation. They're not even entering the debate. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Nah, I
They're
get
not
it.
even throwing their 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 name in the ring or in the hat or what have you. They're just like, all right, well, we'll let Nigerians and Ghanaians fight over this to the death. But yeah,
Right.
Senegalese, they have a right to that claim too.
Yeah. Yeah. How was it growing up in Queens? So like you're Sudanese, you're Muslim, but you're in Queens, New York City, like the 80s, and this is like a hotbed for Black culture, not just hip hop, because folks who don't
Facts.
know about Queens, it's so many legendary Black figures lived in Queens. So James Brown, and Malcolm X, um, and the list, Miles Davis, the list goes on and on. But for us in our age group growing up in that time period, hip hop was just such a hotbed, and for Black culture. What was it like for you growing up? Because I can imagine. I think just from from the African culture, what you hear a lot when there's comparisons or discussions about different folks from the diaspora, whether it be Black Americans and then the various countries of Africa. Like you guys have a really strict household. You're Muslim, but then there's this rebellious culture of hip hop. How did you live and manage in that growing up at that time?
I'm gonna say at first, hip hop was pretty much rejected by older people in your family,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be your older siblings. Everybody was just listening to like Keith Sweat, New Jack Swing. Like that was more like wholesome, music, R&B. So initially, when you get into hip hop, like my parents and stuff like that, this is not music. What is this that you listen to?
Right.
But at the same time, I think before hip hop turned into like Onyx and NWA and like just really wild for the night type of behavior, you had Public Enemy, you had Eric B and Rakim, you had Boogie Down Productions, and they were spitting a lot of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They were spitting a lot of knowledge, and they were even talking about Islam,
Yeah.
which to me, they were talking about a version of Islam that I didn't quite understand. So that's why I'm really happy you asked this question,
Mm-hmm.
because growing in the 80s and the 90s, they were talking about the Nation of Islam and Fruit of Islam and Louis Farrakhan, and obviously Malcolm X and so on and so forth. But in Orthodox Islam, you kind of just follow the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. But you don't have all these other like African American dudes wearing bow ties, slinging bean pies. So you're like, what the
Right.
hell is all this? But
Right.
then you get into it more, and you understand where it came from. You
Mm-hmm.
understand how for like you know African American people who had to go through a civil rights movement, who had to go through like who still go through systemic oppression, who
Mm-hmm.
obviously went through slavery. Um, there's a group amongst African American people who found a lot of strength and solace in Islam, and kind of allowed them to rise above some of the limits, whether it was like mental or from an organizational or discipline standpoint
Mm-hmm.
that American society was placing on them, bringing them down. So for me, through like Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, Eric B and Rakim, I kind of found out more about the Nation of Islam and that side of Islam. So I was able to kind of like have some conversations with my pops about it, and he was kind of explaining to me how, in his opinion, those organizations were more political, you
Mm-hmm.
know, less so than religious. And
Gotcha.
he would explain to me how it's, you know, uh, the plight of the African American, although similar, is different than the plight of the African in
Yeah.
America.
Yes.
Because my father's was working for the United Nations.
Mm.
We lived in Jamaica, but we lived in Jamaica Estates. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little
Jamaica.
money.
This is Jamaica Queens, by the way.
Yeah.
We lived in Jamaica Estates, went to private schools, so on and so forth. And so he was just explaining to me the difference. Um, but other than this element of Islam that's in hip hop culture, well, at first I was a dancer, like
Mm.
I was always dancing. I mean, come on, who did it?
Who
Who was
didn't
it
dance?
mimicking? Who was it
Right.
mimicking Kid and Play, MC Hammer, whomever,
Right.
right? So it was like when my family would have their friends over at the house,
Mm.
other like Sudanese people and older people or whatever. It was a show. It was like my son, Muhammad, he can dance. And I would just walk through the living room. There'd be like 8 adults sitting down, they'd be like, dance. And just like the flick of a switch, I'd start doing
Right.
the running man. I'm doing splits. You know what I'm saying? I'm grabbing my foot, jumping over my ankle. And I was like, all right, am I done now? Can I go back to my room? um, but I do think that, um, the integration of hip hop with me growing up, vis-a-vis the African culture
Mhm.
and the Islamic culture, wasn't that big a deal because my parents are just pretty modern Muslims, if you will.
Okay.
And my father, having worked for the United Nations and traveled the world, was just a pretty modern man, you know.
Which is great. I think that's amazing, and I'm sure it kind of lended to your musical palette. Not because not only you being a child of hip hop, but I can imagine, which I see with a lot of, ironically, I see this a lot with um, Black folks who grew up in America, but like their families are either from the Caribbean or from various countries in Africa, where it's like you are getting exposed to like a plethora of like music. It's not just it's not just like Anita Baker and then like Kid and Play, right? It's kind of
Right.
like you getting like the jazz, you're getting the calypso, you're getting like early Afrobeat, of course, with Fela and all the his the people that came after him. You're getting all of that, and I'm sure that helped to shape who you were, like how you listened to music and what you had an appreciation for.
And to add on to that, my uncle, who
Mm-hmm.
was my mother's brother, his name is Bashir Abbas, and he's one of the all-time greatest Sudanese musicians.
Mm.
You know, so anytime he was in town and he'd be at the crib, my moms would call all the aunties. She'd be like, Bashir's in town. They would cook dinner for him, get the tea going, and then when they felt he was warmed up, they would just give him the lute, which is like the Middle Eastern guitar,
Yeah.
Sudanese guitar. That's his instrument of choice,
Mm-hmm.
and he would just start playing, and then my mother and all the aunties would start singing, and they would all start clapping. One of the aunties would start drumming on a chair or whatever.
Mm.
So even within the home, there was a lot of constant, um, musical influence, but also constantly this need from my mother specifically to make everybody feel hosted, to create like a really nice vibe. So
Yeah.
very early on, I just had this thing where it's like, it's not all about how crazy a turn up is or how wild something is. You can just build a vibe and just keep it percolating for hours, and don't nobody want to go nowhere. So
Right.
I got that from my mom's, I think.
And you know what? And when you say that, it's a perfect explanation to your style. Like being at an event, like you, and this is something I've learned from you. I learned from you. I've learned from, likes of MOS and other DJ friends of ours. Is that it's not all about like, getting shit faced and turning. It's about like creating this feeling in a room with the music, with the energy, and I think that's super important. It's something that I feel like DJs should be conscious of when they go about doing their craft. It's not just about showing up and slamming 20 the top records in a row and then getting out. It's like, nah, we're gonna create this energy through music.
I
Um,
mean, some of us had to DJ for like 5, 6 hours a night routinely. And then we knew that just slamming bangers was not sustainable. Because even if you could slam the bangers for like hours on end, the people, either their energy would go down
mhm.
or they would get so drunk, everybody would get washed, and that would also be problematic.
Yeah, yeah,
So that was a thing for me. I was just like, everybody has all these energy bags, all these different vibes, all these, I call it like energy budget. What's in your budget? Oh, you probably got about an hour of like winding your waist in you.
yeah,
You got
yeah.
an hour of singing along to R&B. You got an
Right,
hour of like, MOP
mm,
and getting rowdy. And
right.
that's what I would try to do. I would just try to manage all of these so we could all last for
Mhm.
like, a few hours.
I really quick, I wanted just to go back a little bit, and we were talking about hip hop and how you were learning about, like, I guess, an alternative side to Islam with, you know, the nation and the fruit. But when I see you and knowing who you are, and then also knowing that you grew up in Queens, I feel like the native tongues was a movement that I feel like you would have connected intimately to, because they were so much about identity and Afrocentrism and pro-blackness, but not in a political way, like more of like a fun way, and more of a joyous way. And most of them are from, you know, Queens and Long Island. So I almost feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that was, I guess for you growing up, like that was like your home
I mean,
base.
it gets no better than the native tongues, and for me and very many people from my generation, Tribe
Mhm.
Called Quest. You know,
Tribe, yeah.
those first three albums. You know, like you could talk about Wu Tang, and you can be like, where did Wu Tang peak? And you'd be like, it's probably Cuban Links. You know, right?
Right,
And you
right.
think of like, and then when you think about all of native tongues, and you're like, when did they peak? And you have to say it's probably Tribe's 1, 2, 3 albums,
Mm-hmm.
right around that same time. You know, De La Soul is Dead, maybe Balloon Mind State,
Mm-hmm.
but there was just something about the first 3 Tribe albums for me. They just kind of changed the game. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think we all had heard Q-Tip on like um, a couple of Jungle Brothers
Yeah,
tunes.
he was a couple. He was on. I think he had a couple bars on Buddy, and I think he had a couple bars.
Like he was on Black is Black, and then
Black
there
is
was the
Black.
first
Yeah,
Jungle Brothers record that he was on with Red Alert, and I think, but I don't think we were ready for people.
People's
Instinctive
Instinctive
Travels.
Travels. Mm-mm.
I don't think we were ready because they just fucked our heads up, and you know we definitely weren't ready for the Low End Theory, and then it just kept on just making it even better with Midnight Marauders. So for me, you know, there was a recent conversation on social media about which artist, if of any of all time,
Mm-hmm.
have released the best back-to-back albums, right? The
Mm-hmm.
best back-to-back. And so everybody, obviously, there's so many bands out there, and it's so subjective.
It is.
And you had tons of different, you know, proposals. Me, I had said, if it's not, you know, Michael with Off the Wall and Thriller
Mm-hmm.
back to back,
Right.
then for me, it'd be maybe D'Angelo with Brown Sugar and Voodoo. Like, you know, no skips, like
Yeah.
crazy, right? But then we got into the conversation, and we're like, which hip hop artist can we add to that bag? And through everybody I spoke to, it was probably just Tribe. And of course, people disagree. Which are their 2 best albums? I think everybody agrees on Low End Theory,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a faction of people who say People's Instinctive Travels, and
Mm-hmm.
then you have another faction who say Midnight Marauders. I happen to skew towards People's and
Mm-hmm.
Low Ends, but that's neither here nor there. The fact of the matter is that what Tribe did is that they came out of that uh, native tongues movement, and they really took it to a place where they made it, you know, timeless, really timeless. Because and this is not to knock the other artists; they're all legendary. But those 3 albums, they haven't aged, or they aged really well.
They age really well. Yeah. I mean,
You know,
from content to engineering, and and engineering is, I think, is probably such an underrated aspect of when we talk about what makes albums great, right? When you
facts.
listen to them, like sonically, it's the reason why Off the Wall stands the test of time, because if you
Oh
listen
my
to it,
God!
it sounds like they're using technology of today, but they weren't.
Right.
You know what I mean? I feel the same way about Life After Death. Like, to me, Life After Death and Ready to Die they're 2 great albums, but they're so far apart, because sonically, Life After Death is so far superior to the sounds that they were
Yeah,
creating.
Ready to Die is boom bap, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah. It's
You
it's
know.
just, and
Yeah.
then when you listen, it's like, wow, you know, a lot of it has to do with what they were sampling and all that type of stuff. But
Indeed.
I agree. I agree. Um, so so you mentioned, which a lot of us, and with my guests, we talk about this, like growing up as children of hip hop, like you pretty much have your hand in the what's considered the traditional four elements, right? You've danced a little, if you have artistic skills, you've done graffiti a little bit, you've tried your hand at rapping, or you at least wrote a rhyme at some point in your life, and and then DJing. Um, what at what point did you realize, like, all right, DJing is going to be my thing?
DJing chose me because, as I told you, when I was like 11 to 12, I was dancing. I was
Mm-hmm.
mimicking all the dance moves. I had the high top fade, all of that, right? I weighed 130 pounds soaking wet or whatever. And then as I started getting into like my mid-teens, 14, 15, and so
Mm-hmm.
on, I got into rhyming. Like rhyming became my thing. I
Okay.
was just like, uh, it was my passion. We had a little clique out in Queens. Shout out my man Stan. He was kind of like he was the RZA of our clique. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? He was the producer. He put everybody together. He had a name that was, it's kind of unfortunate because he was a little too early with his name, but
Mm-hmm.
his name and the name of the collective was Jig for Life. So
Mm.
he was using that term Jiggy super early, right?
Wow.
And as we started like coming up, obviously, like, Jay-Z started calling himself Jigga.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we was a little bit later in like our early 20s by that point, right?
Right.
But we're like, damn, we've been like we've been on the grind, we've been trying to come up. And then Jay-Z's throwing the word jig left and right. Like,
Right.
that's a dub, like we can't use it anymore, But we was into rapping and we was really, really serious about it, to the point where, like, back then, in order to get your music heard, you'd have to get it in front of the A&Rs and
Mm-hmm.
the record label execs. There was no YouTube, no SoundCloud. And I had one of my cousins, he used to drive limos for execs at Def Jam, I think. He said that's what he would tell me. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
yo, I drive all the Def Jam dudes around. Just give me a demo, give me a demo. And back then, like, the golden rule was like, you can let somebody hear your demo, but you can't give it to them.
Right.
You can't give them the demo.
That's how you get your
And I was
shit
like, yo,
stolen.
yeah, I was like, yo, just play it for them,
Mm-hmm.
but don't give it to them, right? So he played our demo with Stan and the other homies from Jig for Life. And I guess they really, really liked it. And I don't know, he was a little impressionable. He let him hold it, right?
Mm.
And I don't know, man, like a few weeks later, that a Violator compilation came out with that LL Cool J song, The Bomb. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Ba, 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 da, da, da. And that was just the exact same way that Stan had cut up that horn sample. The
Wow.
exact same way. And I was like,
Wow.
really? You give it to some Def Jam execs, and then a Violator song comes out a few weeks later with the exact same sample, chopped up the exact same way. And I was just like, I was kind of like getting disenchanted with hip hop. Not that I
Mm-hmm.
was like, beating the pavement, doing every open mic or whatnot, but I had gotten some good looks.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to Black Lilies at was it Roseland, where the Roots would have their weekly
Was it
jam
Roseland?
session.
I can't remember where that thing was.
It may have been,
Yeah.
but I would go to Black. I would get on stage. It's funny because I know Questlove personally now, but he probably doesn't remember me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't even remember the years, man. What is this? 97, 98,
Maybe
ninety
something like
nine?
that.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Just hopping on the stage and spitting like a hot 16 and the crowd getting wild. It was like your 8 Mile moment. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Right. Right. Right.
Um, and I think at the same time that all this was happening, I was a little disenchanted with the direction that hip hop was going into.
Mm-hmm.
Just being a huge fan of Public Enemy, Eric B. and Rakim, Nas, Tribe Called Quest, so on and
Mm-hmm.
so forth, Wu-Tang. And, it was just getting a little too, it was getting a little too commercial for my liking. And, especially New York hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that kind of coincided with the time I graduated college um, with an electrical engineering degree. And also like the first time in my life that I started making money.
Mm-hmm.
And as I got disenchanted with hip hop, I started to discover all the samples behind the music.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? I really love Tribe. I really love the Far Side. What the fuck were they sampling? you know. And so that's when I discovered Roy Ayers, you know, Weldon
Mm-hmm.
Irving, Don Blackman. And then I really understood that there was this whole jazz fusion scene that happened in Jamaica, Queens in the late 70s.
Yep.
Um, uh, what's
Bernard Wright.
Bernard Wright, you know, all of those guys, just incredible collective of talented musicians that ran together. I found out that John Coltrane and Miles Davis used to live in Jamaica, Queens at a certain
Mm-hmm.
point. So I really got into, you know, researching this music, and at the time you really couldn't buy it on CD. And it was right around the era where, I don't know if you remember, I think within a year they canceled Napster, they canceled all the peer-to-peers, was it LimeWire, SoulSeek,
LimeWire.
everything,
Yeah.
everything went down. And I had just gotten into like MP3s, so I was able to get all this type of music. And then when it got deaded, I was like, man, I gotta buy it on wax, you know. So
Right.
I started going to like A1. I started buying online from a store called Dusty Grooves in
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, and I was like, you know, fuck it. If I'm gonna buy the equipment to listen to the vinyl, I might as well buy the top notch equipment. So I went to Canal Street. I got a pair of 1210s,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I got a Pioneer like 700 or 800 mixer. It was you know, I had money. I was working for the first time in my life, and I
Right.
still lived at home. I still lived in the basement in Queens, you know.
Right.
So I went to Canal Street. I forgot what I dropped, two grand or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, all right, well, I got a proper setup, and I can listen to this vinyl. And shortly thereafter, maybe like 2 or 3 months, a good friend of mine named Anthony Anthony Low Key from Brooklyn. He's from Park Slope.
Okay.
He was like, "Yo, Mo, you got all this vinyl, man. Yo, just come do a set with us." And I was like, "Bro, I'm not a DJ. I'm a basement bedroom DJ selector. I
Right.
play for myself." You know, this is probably like 2001 at this point.
Okay.
Maybe 2002.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he was like, "Man, come on, just do it, man. It's a small spot. It's called Blah Blah. It's on 7th Avenue. It's gonna be just me and the homies." I said, "All right, bet it up." So I practiced my ass off for my little 1 hour set, you know, because I had an engineering mind state. So I was like, well, if I can um, figure out all the transitions, I can write down all the pitches, you know.
Oh
This record's gonna be
wow.
at +4. This record's gonna be at like
You really,
+1.
you really rock him the DJing. Like
Yeah,
you turned it into a formula. You know, that's
right.
something Rakim would do when he would write. He would kind of like piece it together.
Yeah, and I put the BPM on the sticker, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, well, you know, this is a percentage change with the pitch, and these are BPMs. This is before my ear was trained well enough to just do
To
it
know,
on the
right? Yeah.
fly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I did that, and I went and played my set, and everyone was blown away, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me, I was just happy. I was like, did it go well? I
Mm-hmm.
treated it like some mission critical, like, you know, we're building a data center or something. Did everything
Right.
go well? Nothing
Right.
crashed, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and the funny thing is, that was my first time seeing a Newmark mixer.
Mm.
And if you learn off of one mixer, you've never seen another mixer. The first time you see it, like it's like an alien spaceship,
Right.
right?
You're
I'm
looking
like,
for the
what?
basic stuff. Like, where do I put my headphones in? Like,
I'm
where's the
like,
cue thing? Yeah.
and thank God DJ Elwood. It was DJ Elwood's mixer. DJ Elwood. I met him that day.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up. You know, we've been friends ever since. He's one of my closest friends in real life and also in terms of music soulmate. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he was like, no, he was like, here's the cue. Here's the cue volume. You know what I'm saying? This is the trim. This is the little channel selector at the top. I said, oh, thanks, man. So I did my set, and I did really well, right? And I was just very happy. It was all like rare grooves at a disco-y tempo. And at the time, I was really into uh, Broken Beat from the UK, Bugs in the Attic, all that stuff very early.
Bugs and Attic has some amazing edits, man. I was checking out. I
Right.
was listening to some of this stuff the other day, actually.
So I was kind of mixing the two because their influences were highly rare grooves and Roy Ayers and jazz fusion. So I played
Mm-hmm.
my 1 hour set, and you know, it was like a work of art. It went really well.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this local dude from Park Slope, you know, probably like 10, 15 years older than us at the time. And he was like, hey, man, I just got a bar. on Fifth Avenue in Park Slope and Union. I need a DJ. I was like, in my mind, I was like, these are the only records I have. This is the only thing I know how to play, right?
Right.
And he said, I need a DJ for Saturday night. Are you down? And there was just always a part of me that says, take the gig and figure it out.
Figure it out.
That's
Yeah.
with everything. You know what I'm saying? Like right now, I'm scoring a podcast. I've never scored a podcast in my life. But when somebody said, you want to do it? I was like, yeah, because I'm going to learn.
Right.
And so I took the gig, and it was like the next Saturday. And evidently, because I'm from here and I have so many friends and so much family, advertised it as my first DJ gig. You know what I mean?
Right. So
And
everybody wanted to come out to support.
everyone I knew came out. It was
That's
like
amazing.
60 or 70 people. And I was deep in my crate. It was like, Bugs in the Attic, Soulful House, Rare Grooves, disco, classics. I was doing my thing. Everybody was like dancing. I was like, this is unbelievable. The bar owner was like, this is incredible. He's like, I want you here every Saturday, right? So I was like, I'm your man. And I had to bring my turntables and everything, It was
Different
like,
times, man. Different times.
yeah. And I would take my father's minivan and drive from Jamaica, Queens, right? With the turntables, with like 5 crates, with like, and we'll get to work. And then the next week, right? I came back, and because the novelty wore off, none of my friends were there. They already had committed to come all the way out to Park Slope, right? For me,
Right.
they're just not going to do it every week, right? So none of them showed up, but he had booked a birthday party, like Puerto Rican people. There was like 20 of them. It's girl birthday, right? And nobody was dancing to what I was playing. And they're like, are you gonna play this weird shit all night? And
Wow.
I was like, what do you guys want to hear? Like, do you have like reggae, reggaeton, Biggie? And I was like, man, I got none of that in my crate, because I was like this fucking, deep soul collector. And it was
Right.
the worst stalemate ever, because nothing that they wanted I had, and nothing that I had did they care for. And so it was the worst night of my life. The next morning, it was Sunday morning, I went to Jamaica Avenue. I went to Music Factory. And I went in there, and I pulled one of the sales dudes aside, said, yo, I just need all the compilations of everything. He was like, what do you mean? Dance hall, R&B classics, modern R&B, modern hip hop, old school. And all the house party joints,
Yeah, yeah.
all the killer cuts,
Killer
even
cuts, all
like
that, yeah.
even like the official compilations. I went and spent like $300 or $400
Mm-hmm.
and walked out with 2 crates. And in my mind, I was like, that's it. I don't got to study this music because I know it. I grew up with it.
Right,
I just
right,
wasn't interested in DJing it, right?
right.
And I hear it at the parties, and I sing along, and I dance to it.
Mm-hmm.
And instinctively, I also knew when to play it, because all the DJs kind of played everything the same way.
Right, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm ready. This shit never gonna happen to me again. So I went out the next week, and I was ready to kill it. And I played this more, just a regular New York set. And the crowd was going crazy. And at that point, that's when I caught the bug. And I was like, you know what? Here's your sensibilities. They're all the way left. And here's the people. They're all the way on the right. But I was like, the truth lies in the middle.
Yeah. Always. Always.
Give them what they want, so that they can trust you. And then you can give them what you want. And you can kind of open them up some more. And then you just keep doing that back and forth. And it's a constant pendulum. And you never swing too far on either end. Because if you swing too far to the left, you're going to lose them. And if you swing too far to the right, then they're going to dictate what you're going to play for the rest of the night and
For the rest of
of
the
your
night.
career.
Yeah. That's my motto too. Like, give them what they want so you can give them what they need. And they don't know what they
Right.
need. You
They
know what
don't.
they need, but they don't.
Right.
So you gotta give them what they. It's it's the orange juice with the crushed aspirin. It's that's how they're gonna take. That's how I treat it. It's funny because I didn't know that you got into it so late. I just figured that you were DJing just as long as me, if not longer.
It's my last pillar of hip hop. It's my last. I was dancing, then I was rapping. Actually, when I was dancing, one of my homies blew out his knee dancing. I was like, man, this shit is crazy. Like, let me reconsider this dancing shit.
Right.
Then hip hop, I got disenchanted. Our demo got stolen. I was like, man, fuck this bullshit. And then like you said, DJing found me. And it
Hmm.
found me when I was able to afford the equipment and afford the vinyl. Because back then, you were DJing, you were spending $100 a week on records. You know what I mean?
Easily.
Maybe
You
more.
could go
You
in
know?
for one record and end up spending $200 just because you're just
Exactly.
like, oh, I didn't have this. Oh, I didn't know this was out. Oh, I never seen this before. And then $200 later, you're like, damn. And that's what it was. But you had to have a passion for that because you were spending so much money. It's not like today where
100%.
you could get all this music for free, and or you have a subscription to this, and then you have access to all this stuff. It was different. Like you had to really love it because you were spending your hard-earned money
Yeah. But to your point,
constantly.
like the guys, all the guys of my generation, I I came in the game later than them, and most people didn't know. Everybody thought I was DJing from like the mid '90s, just like everyone else, and
I
that was
mean,
not that was
I
not
think
the
it had a
fact.
lot to do with your sound, what you were pulling from, and like I said, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But like I said, I learned a lot from you and MOS because it was, to me, it was reversed. Like how you said, how you started out, you were just playing the stuff that you liked, and it worked for a little bit, but then you
A
realize
little
like
bit.
that ain't it. For me, the stuff that I loved, like outside of like the surface super popular old school stuff like Kiss, from Prince and Before I Let Go. Outside of that, like the stuff that I really love, like, you know, um, the Billy Ocean Nights, which everybody knows that's my favorite song of all time. And Shaka Khan, I Know You, I Live You, and the B side, the soulful, all that stuff. I felt like I couldn't play because the places that I was being booked and places I was going, like I had to only play, um, what was hot, the hottest, newest hip hop, R&B, dancehall, and house and soca, and that was it. And then when I started kind of, hanging around and being in the same circles as you guys and showing up to your events, and I was like, wait, you could play that? Like you can play that at a party, and there's people that like it, and then that clicked for me. So when me and Mike started doing influence series, that's what that was. It was kind of like this was the perfect balance. Like I can give you a Kenna,
Indeed.
I can give you a Kenna in Theopolis, London, and I can also give you a Jay-Z, a Biggie, and Cameron, and I can give you a Shaka Demus, and I can give you vibes. Like all of this stuff belonged together, and that's when it made sense. But it was around that time when our paths sort of like intersected, and I was educated on like there's way more music than what Hot 97 is giving us.
Yeah,
you know.
but in New York, there's just so many different pockets in New York. There's obviously, everything that descends from like the legendary DJs, Mr. C, Red Alert,
Mhm.
Kid Capri, Funk Master Flex. They kind of like instilled in us a way to play a lot of songs, right? And then there's the Caribbean influence, and then there's the house influence. But around the late '90s, Giant Step did a lot in New York. You know,
Yeah.
they really did a lot, and it's Maurice with Giant Step, with the DJs that he was booking, um, with APT coming up at the same
Oh.
time. If you were hanging out like mostly in Lower Manhattan, you just had access to all these like incredible DJs, and
Hmm.
they were playing house, but they weren't playing house like like Louis Vega or Francois K were playing house. You know what I'm saying? And they were playing like Latin music, but they weren't playing it like, I don't know, like Tony Toka or whatever. Everybody was. It felt like you were inside of a BBC One radio show.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the era, I think, where like Spinner kind of became a house DJ versus being, he was, to me, when he started, he was like a hip hop guy.
Yeah.
This where like Rich Medina
Yeah.
started really making his mark. I think DJ Lindsay had a party called Negro Clash, a collective called Negro Clash. There was just so much interesting sounds. And for me and Stimulus, who
Hmm.
Stimmy is my partner at the Good Spot on Monday nights, we were like, we want to marry everything, just like you
Yeah.
said, but we got to make it coherent. We got to make it coherent. That's the thing. We don't want nobody walking in here thinking it's a random shuffle.
Right.
And
That's true. It's got to make
and
sense.
that's why our whole thing was like always just like, well, hold off on the hip hop, just hold off as long as you can. And 2 a.m., 2:15, everybody's still fucking with us. Boom. Play the biggest hip hop song du jour. And
Right.
it would just melt faces,
Yeah. No, that
and it was
made sense.
only because we just kept on feeding people all these other different ways to stimulate them. No pun intended, obviously.
Right.
Stimmy's DJ name is Stimulus. Um, but yeah, man, all our influences in one.
Yeah, that's the I think that's the best way to be. I think that's what helped shape my identity. I mean, I had the talent, but I guess creating an identity was just trying to realize like how can I mesh all of this together, and like you said, for it to make sense. It can't just be super random. Like they need to understand this journey as a purpose and as a mission. And first of all, just allow me to talk shit for a minute. So those of you who were in New York City, um, and on the nightlife scene, whether it just be a patron or whatever, a socialite, if you will, from I want to say 2009 till about 2012, maybe. I want to say, yeah, I
Hmm.
want to say 2012, 2009, 2012. DJ MoMa, Stimulus, um, Mark and Main, Sinclair, myself, and Mike Mancini,
Kissing MOS and
Kiss and
Legendary
MOS,
Damon,
and then and Legendary Damon, and also me and Dubs had
right?
a spirit spot net from Monday through Wednesday. We had the fucking hottest parties in the city. There's not
Locked,
a discussion. Like from Monday through Wednesday, you would go
padlocked.
Monday, you would come to the Influence Series with me and Mike, and after that, the after party was the good spot with MoMA and Stem and Sinclair and Mark and Main, and then Tuesday nights it was me and Dubs. We came a little later. We came around like 2011. We came like 2011, and then Wednesday nights was Baby I'm a Star with MOS, Kiss, and Damon, and they were for those 3 nights. It was very similar but very different energies and different parties. It was like you're going to hear good music by good DJs, but it was going to be a completely different energy, different energy. And I think that period for me as a DJ and a New York native, our time period was prime time New York City nightlife, like prime time.
I think it was prime time for me in terms of being a contributor to the
Yes,
nightlife.
yes,
Being a contributor for me, of course. Evidently, I think there were eras before us
of
when
course,
maybe
yeah.
we're a little too young to hop from the Paradise Garage to Danceteria to whatever,
Right, right, right.
But yeah, as far as like an era where creativity uh, wasn't only allowed, it was welcomed,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and to have your personality and to have all these venue owners downtown who wanted what we were doing
Yeah.
and who were kind of like accepting our crowds. Yeah, that was a great time. That
Yeah,
was a
it
great
was
time.
it was so organic, it was so natural, it was so um pure. Just even in the sense that you could walk into one of these parties and just see anybody, but it wasn't a big thing. It just wasn't like you'd go to, you know, a good spot and see.
You know who used to come through a lot?
Mm,
Like Kid Cudi.
yeah,
He
just
would pop
in
up.
there. Just be
Steve
in there.
Nash.
Yeah.
Steve Nash was, that pole that was there at 105 Rivington?
Yeah,
Steve
yeah,
Nash was up on a pole one day,
yeah.
just like wilding out,
Yeah,
We just had so many people come through and, nobody asked any questions. Nobody
no, it
said
was
nothing.
just
No
so
cap.
natural, so normal, so just whatever. I remember the night you called me. He was like, "Yo, what's popping off the wall?" I was like, "We solid was good." He's like, "Yo, I got cold with me. We coming through," and I'm like, "All right, like." Like
That's
this
when you were at the downstairs spot,
49 Grove. Yeah.
49 Grove. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember that.
Yeah. Those
Yeah.
are good times. Those are good times. Um, so you mentioned just being a contributor, and this is what I want to get into because I feel like this is your biggest to date, anyway, contribution to the nightlife scene, to New York City culture, but more importantly, um, to Black culture and African culture. Um, I want to say, I guess, out of the evolution of what the Good Spot was, and then of course when you guys were doing Harlem Nights at Jenny's, which was another phenomenal weekend
Great
party,
run.
nuts,
Yeah, 5-year run. We could do a whole podcast on that.
nuts. Um, Out of all of that, you guys sort of uh, created like this East African nightlife coalition organically. It seemed like it, right? So you guys come up with this idea, and please tell me the story, how it came about, and why you wanted to do it. Um, but the Everyday People Party. Which,
All right, so I'm going to touch on Everyday People, how it came about, and then let's loop back, no pun intended, to the African sound because there's
okay,
kind of two different things going on there, right?
okay.
So Everyday People, it started in 2012, and my partner Sada,
Mm-hmm.
who is a Somali American woman, she grew up in Atlanta. At the time, she had been in New York for a few years. I met her through another friend of mine, East African friend, at the Good Spot. She
Mm-hmm.
actually pulled up one night on my birthday in 2009 on a
Mm-hmm.
Monday night. She was there with Theophilus London.
Mm-hmm.
It was a crazy night. 3 years later, she was visiting her family in Kenya, and she hit me up on Facebook, and she was like, Mo, I want to start a day party, something like the Europeans are doing in the meatpacking with the champagne brunches, but not douchey, just like great vibes, good music. And in my mind, I had a pretty good idea of how a day party should flow because I had DJ'd the Do-Over twice, and I
Mm-hmm.
had only been twice, but both times I had been in 2008 and 2009, I had DJ'd it, and I was like, they're onto something with the day vibes. It just opens up a whole nother catalog of music that you can play
Mm-hmm.
that you really can't touch at night. Um, and the same day that she hit me, Justin, who used to be the sound tech at 105 Rivington,
Mm-hmm.
who went on to manage the food and beverage at the Rivington Hotel, on the same day he hit me. And he was like, Mo, I think you should do a day party, a brunch party at
Mm-hmm.
105 at the Rivington Hotel. So I was just looking, I'm like, this is a sign, I got one Facebook message from Sada and one text message from Justin. So
Right.
I kind of arranged a meeting with the three of us, and it was in April in 2012, and we was like, it's a brunch party. Maybe we'll go from like 12 to 5, 12 to 4. It's brunch,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be playing music, right? And just like the coolest, most amazing collective of beautiful Black people from all over the boroughs, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of Brooklyn influence pulled up that day. Um, and it was a whole vibe, right? But then when it ended at 4, when they had to turn the restaurant over and prepare it for dinner service, nobody knew where to go. We all was on the sidewalk,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked maybe like a fashion show. There was like 150 beautiful Black people on the sidewalk on Rivington.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone looking at me like, "What's next?" You're the guy. And I had nothing, bro. I
Wow.
had nothing. It was 4 p.m. on a Saturday. I,
Wow.
Solange was there. Uh, Blood Orange, I forgot his name, the lead singer from Blood Orange. He ran
Mm-hmm.
with Solange. He was there. Roble was hosting with us. He had all his crew, all his
Mm-hmm.
models. Sada had all her friends I had all my peoples. And I was just like, guys, I got nothing. I put up a break, right?
Yeah.
But because I learned that's what I do, right? I was like, next time around, I'll be ready. So when the second one came around, I told Justin, I said, Justin, when you're shutting us down at 4 or 5, let me take everyone in the club, 105 Rivington. and
Mm.
let me go till your 10 p.m. party starts. He was like, I'm with that. So 5 p.m. we went from like this day, from like this lit brunch, lit as in sunlit.
Right.
This is before we used the word lit, right? It was a sunlit environment.
Hmm.
And 5 p.m. we're just like, ladies and gentlemen, just go through that door. And then they went, it was 105 Rivington. I had already set up. I was playing music. It was dark. Candles were everywhere. And the energy was through the roof, right? And people were like, this is perfect. This is exactly what we needed.
Hmm.
We got to chill. We got to take pictures. We got to kick it. And then we really got to dance and sweat it all out. So we did that again one more time. And then we quickly outgrew the venue, you
Hmm.
know? And I think one of the staff members had moved down the street to the DL
Hmm.
on the corner of Delancey and Essex. And now it's a
Yeah.
3-story establishment with a rooftop, with a retractable roof and all of
Yeah.
that. And now we could have went from like, 200 people to 800. So that's when we moved to the DL. And I think that's probably the time that everyday people started to become a thing that a lot of people were talking about,
Okay.
because we still were not posting the address on anything. We would just get up there, and we had a little Instagram going and our little Facebook,
Hmm.
and we would be like, Saturday, everyday people. And we'd put the time, 12 to 8. Or it would be Sunday, everyday people. So everybody in the comments was like, where is this party?
Right.
And people were like, is this on a Saturday? Is this on a Sunday? I need to plan. And we're like, we didn't say nothing. We didn't respond to anything. It
Right.
was more like it was a bad signal. It was
Okay.
a bad signal for all our friends and their friends. So they see the bad signal, they know what time it is, they know where to go. And, eventually the DL, the 800 person capacity, we probably exceeded it. But it was such a wonderful venue.
Hmm.
We didn't feel the need to go anywhere. But after about 2 or 3 years at the DL, I want to say by the end of 2014, it became evident that we needed a bigger venue. So that's when 2015, I think we moved to La Marina, and we
Okay.
started doing other
Damn, it was
things
that
like,
long ago? I felt like it was
yeah,
later than that.
it
I feel like
was,
I got to La Marina in like 2018, but okay. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, and since then, just bigger venues, Industry City, maybe
mhm.
get like somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000. I don't want to share the real numbers because I don't want to get anyone in trouble.
Right.
Elsewhere, we're Stu a day, maybe a couple thousand people going in and out. Um, so that is, everyday people in a nutshell. Um, but now, if you want to talk about culturally, the
Wait,
relevance of
before
it,
before you get to the African aspect of it, which is
yeah,
super important, because since we're here on the everyday people thing, uh, two things. One, tell me how you came up with the name, and now we got to discuss the fact that it is a global brand. It's not just something that's happening in the Lower East Side of New York
indeed.
City. So talk about the name, how'd you got the name, and then talk about like how it just became global.
Sada came up with the name.
Okay.
Sada was like, I want to call it Everyday People. And at the time, I was like, 90s R&B song that's played out for me. It's a little corny, but I
Right.
didn't really care. I was just like, I was happy to have found somebody from outside of my nightlife bubble,
Hmm.
you know, because, okay, I do a party with you. I do a party with Stem. I do a party with MOS. You do a party with MOS. I do a party with Legendary Damon.
Hmm.
We're all within the
The
same
same.
bubble, right?
Yeah.
And so while we're running with a bunch of like-minded individuals, we're recycling the same 1,000 people for our
Hmm.
events. And Sada was not from the nightlife, not from music. She's just kind of like a bit of an it girl who had like her finger on the pulse of the culture in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
And she wanted to do something, and she was very passionate. And one of her best friends was a graphic designer. So Tembi, she came up with like the style, the really minimalist uh, picture, image-based flyers, right? Which
Hmm.
back then nobody was doing that,
Yeah. Flyers were
Um,
all they were so gaudy back then.
oh my God, yeah. Uh, and then she had her friend Kadeem, who was a budding photographer with an incredible eye. And I was like, you know what? Sada is moving with like her little tribe, you know?
Hmm.
And they're all creative and they all have great taste. Those are the things you really can't teach. So when she said everyday people, I was like, I wouldn't, at the time, I forgot, how old I was, but that for me, I'm probably like 10 years older than Sada. That's kind of like, it was just a played out song, even though it was a classic.
Right.
But for the generation of millennials, younger millennials that came after us, 90s R&B and 90s hip hop, that they were like 11 years old when it came out,
Yeah.
So when
Right.
they hear Aaliyah, they were like, oh, my mother used to play this in the car. My mother used to play this in the kitchen. And then when they hear it again as adults, it's like they have this incredible moment. Whereas
Hmm.
with this music, I had my moment in the club
Right.
when it came out,
Right. Right.
at the
Right. Right.
house parties, everything. I was there for it. So this is me reliving it. But I understood that for her, because she was very big on like, can we do like a 90s R&B? And I was like, it's 2012. I probably have done 5 or 6 90s R&B parties in my life, right?
Right.
This is not necessarily my interest, but it's like nothing to me, right?
Hmm.
I do this shit with my eyes closed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So when I got up there and I started playing for her and her friends, the 90s R&B, they was like, this guy's incredible. Who is this DJ? He's
Hmm.
amazing. She's like,
Right.
oh, that's my friend Mo. To my friends, they already knew what I did.
Right. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
following, they already, because they've been rocking with me for like maybe 10 years at the time. But Everyday People, the name and the original focus on 90s R&B was very much Sada's idea. And I was kind of executing for Sada.
Got you. Got you.
And I was kind of like, this is how I would get the venues.
Hmm.
I would get the DJs. I would help set everything. I would talk to venues. I'd be like, guys, so I know you sell $14 cocktails,
Hmm.
but it's 1 p.m. on a Saturday. And we just set a lower price for our peoples. They come in from
Right.
Brooklyn. They don't want to pay $11 for a beer. Can we do
Right.
$10 on a cocktail and $8 on a beer, please? So that's what I was doing. But in the meantime, already had a very solid following.
Hmm.
And, unlike her following, because they were a little younger, my following was spending money.
It was a perfect storm, really.
It was a perfect. And then we brought Roble in
Hmm.
from Jump to host, and he had the TV show Chef Roble and Co.
Hmm.
So he came with this whole other element of like, kind of like notoriety, and visibility and a big following on Instagram. He probably had like 150,000 followers back then, which is a lot. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Especially
To
back
this
then.
day, it's a lot. Yeah, but
Yeah.
especially back then when
Yeah.
everything was organic to a certain extent. Um, so yeah, that's the name. That's the original energy. And then you
And and
said,
and and so what's crazy. And so before we get to it now being a global brand, what you brought up is what when you really think about it. For her and her friends in their age group, like '90s black music, whether it be R&B and hip hop, for them is what '70s funk soul was for
was
us.
for us,
Yeah,
right?
for us
We
it
grew
was
up
like
listening to hip hop, and then
right.
we go to the party and somebody's playing George Michael, Everything She Wants. And we're
Yeah.
like, wait, I remember this
I remember
song.
this, right? And you're
This
singing
song.
it, and it's and even for '80s stuff, because we were still young then. So whether it be Madonna or Michael Jackson or the Gap
Heaven
Band, it's
Champagne
kind of like
King.
it's like like I remember my mom and my dad playing this and whatever, and that's what '90s are. It's crazy. So yeah, so now Everyday People is global. I mean, you guys are doing Everyday People and Tanzania. You've done it. You've done a couple
Well,
countries in Africa, no?
I tell you what, we did it last year. Obviously, in the States, the residencies are, New York, LA, Miami, but we've
Mm-hmm.
also hit several, other cities
Mm-hmm.
for one-offs in the States. We have a residency in Toronto, but we do it maybe like twice a year. Uh, in Europe, we started off last year our Europe run, which was like London, Paris, Berlin. It
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful. This year, obviously COVID came through, but we were going to add Stockholm, Amsterdam, and a few other places.
Mm-hmm.
And then, my favorite is the continent.
Yeah.
We do it in Nairobi, in Kenya, Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa. And I think this year we were trying to add something. We did do a one-off Everyday People New Year's travel thing in Zanzibar. That was
Zanzibar,
maybe in
yeah.
2016, 2017, which Zanzibar is, technically part of Tanzania.
Yeah, it's the island
Uh,
off of it.
yeah.
So, but how did this, because people have hot parties that run for a long time, all the time in cities, but they never become global. Um, I almost want to assume it's because of the music that the brand was able to expand like that. But how did you get it from this thing we're doing in New York City to this thing that we're doing all across the globe?
I mean, I think very simply put, it was three things. It was the music,
Mm-hmm.
New York City, and Instagram. And I'm going to go through them one by one.
Mm-hmm.
The music, evidently, everybody who came to Everyday People were just always having a good time. Whether I'm DJing or somebody else was on, a consistent, I guess, praise that we get is that people like the music at Everyday People. And that's very important to keep people coming back. The Instagram side of it, I like to think that there are certain parties for different social media. So, for instance, when Twitter was like the hot social medium, the do-over popped off,
Okay.
and the do-over was kind of like the Twitter party, in my opinion. Like their Twitter account was popping. They had a Twitter account for the line because the line outside was so crazy. So the do-over line had a separate Twitter account.
Wow.
And they announced everything through Twitter. And so they kind of benefited from the time when influential people joined Twitter. For us, I think we were the first party to really just go crazy on Instagram,
Okay.
because the visuals, the photographers, the recaps, the fashion sense. So that helped to carry very far. You had people in Johannesburg, like year two, who hit me up and they were like, "We love what y'all do. Can we start Everyday People here?" And at the time, it wasn't able to work out for a variety of reasons. We got it done eventually, 4 or 5 years later. But the visuals and this, just the fabric and all these Black people, that's what Black people everywhere could relate to. And then I think lastly, New York, man. I still think New York is the most influential place in the world. So whenever you get a stamp of approval from New York, it goes a long way. I mean, we know it goes a long way domestically.
Yeah.
But internationally, just so much weight. The fact that we were like looked at as one of the premier parties in New York, everywhere we went, it was just like, that was the calling card, Oh, we'd love to do something with y'all. Yeah, we'd love to make it happen. And people were just reaching out to us. And what New York also did is that all these same people who wanted to partner up with us in other cities and other countries, they would come to New York. So they would come experience it firsthand, and they would go back home determined to make it happen. And some of them, while they were here, they'd have the wherewithal to get in touch with me or Maine or Sinclair or Sada, so that by the time they left, we'd be in our meetings and be like, "Yo, so-and-so wants to do Everyday People in Miami. You know him? Yeah, I bet. So let's talk to them. Let's see what we can do."
Right.
And it was the same with Nairobi, Addis Ababa, Johannesburg. It's all people that we met in New York who told us how much, and what we would tell them is like, well, listen, if we're not familiar with that city or that market, you got to build a case for us, because we don't want to do no whack shit,
Right.
It's the last thing we want to do. So I was like, put together a dossier and show me the venues, show me the venues. Let me know what DJs you got locally that work, that are on brand, that bring the same aesthetic musically. And people would be like, "Yo, so-and-so does this, that, and the third." And so everywhere we went, we would just kind of form like Voltron with what they had going on locally. And because when we would come, their local market would know about us, it would make their event bigger, So it was just like,
I
it was
think
an incredible thing.
I correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I do feel like your engineering background and the type of mind, because first of all, most people don't utilize both sides of their mind effectively or at the same, level.
Hmm.
So I feel like that benefited you, but I also feel like the part of your brain, the scientific aspect of it, I think aided you tremendously in how you went about doing business for everyday people. Like everything you did was like really, really thought out. Like it might have been organic about how it came together, but you were very, very strategic about the music that you played, the type of people that you invited, how you went, like you even said, how you went about setting up shop in other countries or other states, and that it made sense. And that's one of the things I've always admired about you. One of the things I learned, because I study everybody and my friends especially, I think success comes from partnership and relationship, right? So you've
Hmm.
always had the proper team around you, whether it was the good spot and it was you and Stim and Sinclair and Mark and Maine, you know, or then with everyday people with you and Mark and, and
It was
Sada,
me, Sada, and Roble at first.
Roble at
Just me,
first.
but then I brought everybody in
Then you
later
brought
because I
everybody
had
in.
already
Right.
worked with them.
But it all made sense, right? That's why me and Mike joke all the time.
Yeah.
And he thinks I'm still mad at him because we had created something so wonderful in in the influence series. And I finally had a partner. I felt that we were equally yoked. And as far as like what we want culturally and knowing how we want to move. And then like, it was a crazy time. I'm never gonna lie, it was a crazy time those years. And Mike was like, yo, I can't do this no more. I'm out. And I was
Right.
like, yo, what? Like, no, like we're winning. And he was like, yo,
Well,
I can't do this.
the same thing kind of happened to me that happened to you is that Sinclair, um, at the peak of the good spot, at the peak, a
Mm-hmm.
year in, he moved to LA, you
Mm-hmm.
know? He had to move to LA for like some work for his partner's work or something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Sin, don't go. We got something special. It could really pop. And then Stimmy moved to Berlin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So after about a year and a half, both of my partners were gone. But I was determined to keep it going. And I kept it going. I think I did a good job to keep it popping from like, I guess from November 2007 when we first did Sinclair's birthday until the last one, which would have been November 2010 or 2011. I'm not sure. 2010. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a solid 3 years every Monday. But losing Sinclair to LA and Stimulus to Berlin meant that we'll never know what the good spot could have became.
Yeah.
Because when I started Everyday People and I had my partners consistently, me, Sada, Roble, and then I asked Sinclair to join us because how incredibly valuable and intelligent he is, And then I asked Maine to join us. And then you see what happens when you have consistency, when you can keep
Mm-hmm.
something going. This would have been the 8th or 9th summer. I think the 8th, it would have been summer number 8.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, something like that. But that's it, consistency, you know. Uh, but yeah, the team. It's for me when we started this talking about engineering, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just how I think. That's how I think
Yeah.
about everything, man. I think about everything as problem solving because you know engineering is applied physics. That's what it is. It's not actually physics. You
Mm-hmm.
have to understand the physics. It's just how do you apply it, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because physics, until you do anything with it, is just numbers on a paper, you
Right.
know? It's just maybe like planets orbiting one another. It's gravity.
Right.
But once you start to apply it, you have airplanes. So that's what I try to do with everything I do with the nightlife. Any kind of knowledge that I have, I try to apply it. Any kind of lesson I learn, I try to remember it. Matter of fact, man, I learn more from other people's mistakes than my own. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I observe people, I observe how they move. I'd be like, oh, look at so and so is trying to act like a mogul. No
Mm-hmm.
one knows him. Then no one's gonna take him serious, right?
Right.
So I was like, be humble. That's what works in New York. People like humble people. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
So now, yeah, let's talk about how the African culture influence made its way. Because when people ask me about everyday people and to describe it, I'm like, it's bohemian chic, It's like it's the most beautiful black people that you can possibly find. That even when you look at them, it's you can't even go, oh, that's this person's from here, this person is this. It's just like it is the diaspora. Like each person represents the entire diaspora,
Diaspora, right on.
physically, and amazing fashion and great music. But as of I want to say maybe the past 3 years, or maybe 3 or 4 years, like the African culture and especially Afrobeat as a music has been a major part of it. And I remember I told you before, like you were my entry into like the new age Afrobeat world because I knew nothing of it. I just knew that you were playing it, but I didn't know anything about it. So talk about how that kind of made its way into not only everyday people, but how you kind of became one of the faces or one of the leading DJs here with Afrobeat.
Well, I think you probably remember that even, going back more than 10 years ago, I was already playing African music because, we had the big anthems like Premier Gaou,
Mm-hmm.
which is On dit Premier Gaou n'est pas Gaou. But a lot of those songs, whether they were Coupé de Calais or whether they were Soukous,
Mm-hmm.
they came from like a Francophone Africa, from the French speaking side of things,
Okay.
So it was just kind of always like, this is just African music for Africans in a weird sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then the thing that changed with like the introduction of like the Nigerian Afro beats, and 2008, 2000, no, I mean, maybe 2010,
Mm-hmm.
2011, when those songs started popping up, is that not only were they in English, granted it's pidgin English, not everybody knew that Davido is singing. If
Right.
I tell you, say yo badio,
Right.
that they don't really know that it's just English and you put an O at the end. But there was that element that allowed it to cross over, and then they took from dance hall production values,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So whereas before, the soukous and the coupe de Cali very much sounded like live bands and live drums and everything. All of a sudden, you got something that kind of hit like a rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
like pa 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 pa.
Yeah.
So it had that underlying beat, and very easily I was able to just play it within the dance hall and soca sets,
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time that I started doing that, we started getting a following of Nigerian people,
Mm.
because the interesting thing with New York, the way my following would grow was that the people who were like Sudanese or Eritrean,
Mm-hmm.
they would say, "Oh, there's a Sudanese or Eritrean DJ," so boom, they would all follow me, right?
Right.
So, to the maybe if you're Ethiopian or Somali, they were like, "Oh, the East African guy."
Right.
They would follow me. And then the Africans would be like, he's just African, right? And then everybody else in the Caribbean, and they were just like, well, he's just from New York, right? So I was just kind of
Right.
like pooling all these different layers of the diaspora that would just come to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until 2011, 2012, I DJ'd a birthday party for a Nigerian homegirl of mine, Nigerian model based in New York named Aina. And she gave me a whole folder. She was like, Mo, these are the songs that are popping in Lagos right now. It's my birthday. We did it at the Submerser downstairs.
Submersive. Jesus.
You need to do a set for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, a Submerser, I'm playing like deep house and soulful house, and I'm not really playing any of this shit. But when I listened to it, there was songs like D'banj, Oliver Twist, dun 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 dun. I'm like, well, that kind of sounds like house.
Right.
I could fit that in there. There was songs like Wizkid, Caro, and I was like, well, this is up tempo.
Right.
That works. Let's just keep it going. And that night, I did that set for her and her friends. It was about 20, 30 minutes long, and their energy was incredible. And I just said to her, listen, we're in the Submerser. I can't do this all night, but bring your friends Friday to Red Rooster in Harlem. I got you, right? So it kind of became a thing where the Nigerian crew would come and they would patiently wait. Because at the time in Harlem, I could not play Afro beats. If I started playing even too much dance hall, all the Harlem
Yeah,
ladies were just like,
Harlem wasn't big for that. Harlem want their hip hop, they want their
they just wanted
R&B.
Mary J. Blige. Yo, they're like,
Yeah,
can you play Mary J. Blige? Can you play Family Affair? I was like,
right,
I got you, I got you.
right.
So I would wait till the end of the night, 3 a.m. I would be like, the last 30 minutes, Afro beats. And the Nigerians were there going crazy. And my people were going crazy.
Mhm.
And then slowly it started inching towards the middle of the night. I'd be like, you know what? This week I'm starting at 2:45 because everyone's here. And the last 45 minutes is Afro beats. And then I was like, yeah, I'm starting at 2:30, so on and so forth, to the point where the culture of that night, Friday nights at Red Rooster, changed. That people will be there at 12:30, 1, like, let's go.
Mhm.
Give me that Wizkid, give me that Davido, we're ready. And then I was like, boom, 1 a.m. I would do a 30-minute Afrobeat set.
Mhm.
And the local people in Harlem started getting hip to it. And then I was like, man, let me just keep this going, And eventually, um, Friday nights, at Red Rooster in Harlem became the party where I was just establishing the most Afro beats on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
And now with Everyday People being monthly, whereas I feel like Red Rooster Harlem was the lab, that's where I could experiment every week.
Right.
And then I get to Everyday People, I'm like, nah, I know exactly what I'm doing, right? And I would do a set of Afrobeat set that would go off. Sufficient amount of people had heard it on Fridays, so they knew the songs. And then it became more and more of a thing. And, I think 2013, 2014, that's when Afrobeats became a real fixture of Everyday People. And just like when it first started in Harlem, I would play towards the end of the day.
Mhm.
Everyday People being a day party. The end of the day is 9:30, 10 p.m., 10:30.
Right.
And then slowly played earlier and earlier and earlier until, last summer, as soon as the room was ready, boom, Burna
Boom.
Boy, Wizkid,
Yeah.
Davido. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's been the progression, and it really helped take it everywhere because a lot of people were like, we need Everyday People here. We want Afro beats. And then it
Mhm.
kind of became synonymous, I would tell people, yeah, Everyday People, we play about 25%, 30%, 25% Afro beats, but
Mhm.
it's predominantly a hip hop party, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
you got to get there when, we're playing International Players Anthem or Welcome to the Party. Like, it's a hip hop
Yeah.
party. But like you said, every single person represents the entire diaspora in themselves. It's just that their focus is more weighted on different parts of diaspora.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody might be this hip hop guy, but they still like dance hall. They still
Mhm.
like Afro beats. Somebody might be this Afro beats guy, but they know what to do when swag surfing comes on,
Right.
so on and so forth.
It's
And
funny because like me being in Vegas, like there's not real. So I've recently discovered maybe in the last year, like there's like an African club lounge spot. Then there's this other club where they have like a Caribbean night and they do like Afrobeat and soca and dancehall and stuff like that. But on the strip, like it's nowhere to be found. And I am the only person that's playing Afrobeat like in major
wow.
clubs, right? Um, because me, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. Like I don't care what you if you don't know this. Like you're gonna get this and you're gonna love it because this is amazing music. And I remember being I was in Dre's After Hours. So this is like Dre's After Hours is different than Dre's. Like Dre's After Hours, these are hardcore like party is like it's, you know, 5:36 in the morning. People are just walking in and they,
Yeah.
whatever. And what I noticed, I would go like if I would just go hang out, I'd be like, oh yeah, like y'all DJs just I don't get it. Like y'all are just playing like they'll just play the two hot Afrobeat songs, which was or
Davido
three.
Fall,
It was Davido Fall, and they would play If sometimes,
Joanna,
and then they would play Joanna, and that's it.
and that's
And
it.
no
Yeah.
lie, one night I was in Dre's After Hours, and I was rocking, and I was like, y'all gonna get this Afrobeat. And I'm on the mic talking enough shit. I'm like, yo, there's way more than three Afrobeat songs. Y'all need to get with it. And I'm playing stuff, and people are
Respect.
rocking with it. Like they're rocking hard. And then what just so happened, it happened to be like a table full of like Nigerians. And they were like, yo, like, play that shit, play that shit.
Yeah.
And I'm playing it. But it takes DJs doing that for it to really, really spread. I feel like as popular as Afrobeat has gotten, realistically, it's not as big as it could be. I think people are still they're holding on to the crossover hits. But there needs to be DJs like yourself who are just like in a very unique and intelligent way, kind of force feeding this to you because it's something that you need. At any point, did you feel like not only being Sudanese and being from the continent, but did you feel like you kind of had to take on the brunt or, take on that responsibility of introducing this culture to people and letting them know like there's something else out there that's amazing, specifically for Black people that represents us and you should get on board?
Uh, I don't think so. I think,
Mm-hmm.
it's a cliche to use the word organic,
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely feel that like my upbringing in music is centered around like New York music, which is like still the highest level of excellence, whether like all the hip hop, all the 80s R&B, the dance hall and the soca from like the Caribbean communities, the house music
Mm-hmm.
was such a high level of dance music that it's not like there wasn't African music before Afro beats. It was
Mm-hmm.
always there, and I
Right.
knew it. But I was like, it's not really rivaling this kind of stuff,
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's a vibe, it's a mood. Like it's like you play like, you know, a merengue record or some shit like that, or you playing salsa.
Mm-hmm.
It felt extremely cultural. Whereas the beauty of the bulk of the music that we play in New York is that it goes beyond cultures. Everybody's on board. Hip
Right.
hop culture is the number one culture in the world in terms of pop culture, and it was
Right.
started in the Bronx. You know what I mean?
Right.
So for me, I was hearing the African music, I was consuming it, I was playing a little bit of it, but until this Nigerian kind of revolution came along, followed by the South African one, that was when I was like, oh shit, my people done leveled up. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
this is like Sly and Robbie and all of them going crazy in Kingston in the 90s. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? This is
Yeah.
when they came up with that new sound and everybody was gonna get on board. And so when the music came, I was like, my people's ready. I'm gonna start playing it. And I get a lot of people who criticize me, actually, Africans, to be like, you only play like Nigerian music and you only play South African music. And I was like, well, your country got to level up, you know?
They got to do
You're
better.
not you're not there. And now like now in 2020, there's a lot of music from Tanzania that's popping.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of music from Uganda that's popping.
Mm.
Ghana evidently always been had fire. And even Kenya is coming up. But and of course Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast,
Mm-hmm.
always killing the game, right? But outside of that, all the other countries are making stuff that sounds regional, that sounds cultural.
Gotcha.
Angola, can't forget about Angola. They're murdering it. Um, so that's all it is for me. It's just like whenever like one of these countries levels up, and
Mm-hmm.
like the shit that you're making is on par with the standard of excellence that I have from growing up in New York, whether it be hip hop or R&B or dance hall or house. And I'm like, it's on par now, so I can introduce it in my set, and I won't feel like I'm cheating myself,
Okay.
for the sake of representation. Representation is important,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, at the end of the day, the most important thing is the music and the
Right.
quality. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I never felt like I had that pressure because, and I'll say this, there's Nigerian DJs out there. There's plenty of them who want to fly the flag for
Right.
Afro beats and who want to fly the flag specifically for Nigeria. So I mean, let them do it by all means. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's their
Right.
that's their homeland. You know what I'm saying? I
But I feel like for you, because you're in different rooms, like not to say that the Nigerian DJs aren't, but a lot of the ones that I know, a lot of folks who are kind of like, definitely proud in how they live as far as their culture and heritage is concerned. They're in those parties. Like they're at a Nigerian party. They're not,
sure
whatever. You're in different rooms, so you're introducing it to a broader range of an audience. I feel like it, you know?
it, it is, but also feel that's what keeps me maybe a bit different in those rooms.
Okay.
You know, So like you said, there's a DJ who's playing Fall and Joanna and If, right? And then he's playing a mix of R&B and dance hall and reggaeton and house and hip hop or whatever. I'm able to go in that same room and make that set last 30 minutes, or maybe break it up into 2 or 3 15-minute sets.
Right.
And the magic doesn't happen when the people are dancing to those 3 songs. The magic happens when the people are dancing to the other songs that are either vaguely familiar or they never heard. And that's when people walk out of that room, that's what they remember. They don't remember, when you played Pop Smoke. You know what I'm saying?
They don't, because they hear it so much. Every DJ plays it. It's not whatever, but it's kind of like,
now mind you, they're having a great time and they're wilding to it, but that's because they're wired for it.
Right.
But when you do something slightly different from the program, that's what they remember. And it doesn't have to be a lot. I'm telling you, people talk about everyday people like it's the AfroBeats party. And if you look at it, we only play about 20% AfroBeats.
But for a party that big,
but that's what they remember.
Yeah, and you know what it is like in New York City, man. Like, regardless of how diverse we are culturally, for the most part, you go into any party and you're pretty much going to get the same shit that's going on at the party down the street. You know what I'm saying? So that's what makes it stand out so much, that, that even though it's a hip hop party, you are, taking time out to bring them stuff and doing it in a flow, right? Because that's how I feel. Like you said, it has to make sense. I don't want to shove anything down your throat that doesn't make sense with what's going on in the night. But I think it's important. I think it's super important. If nobody's ever told you, I think it's what you're doing, even though Everyday People is a hip hop party, it's super important that you're introducing other aspects of the diaspora musically in your sets. I think it's super important. One thing I've noted, and I've been to plenty of Everyday People parties, I've DJ'd a couple of them. I've never heard Everyday People at an Everyday People party.
I ran it a lot. I ran it the first year. It was kind of like the anthem. Maybe 2012 and 2013, I ran it quite a bit. But since then, I've kind of retired it, maybe because I'm personally not playing that set time anymore. When the party first started, if it was like an 8-hour party, I was playing 6 or 7 hours,
Right, yeah.
Lion Dub would open for me or whatever, or Rich Knight would open for me. But then eventually I was like, let me just make this more of a 4 or 5 DJ type of lineup. And at that point, everybody that was getting on, whether it was getting on early or the second set or the last set, everybody's always trying to like show their personality. And maybe their personality didn't include a 90s R&B hip hop opening set. You know what I mean? So through the course of the years, that song has gotten played less and less. And when I hear it now at Everyday People, I'm like, oh shit. Like, I haven't heard this in a minute.
Right.
But you're right, man. Year 1 and 2, it got ran quite a bit. And since then, I would hear it once or twice a summer.
I want to talk more about DJing, but I want to get into like, even the reason why I started the loop. For me as a DJ and how I approach it, it's very spiritual, right? Because I have so much respect for the music. There's spirit in the music. As DJs, we have a spirit, and I think it's more than just playing the songs, but I'm trying to connect everybody like spiritually, so we can get on one thread and we can vibe together, which is not easy to do. Like when you see DJs do it, it's because they're really good and they've just put so much time into doing that. I feel like there's DJs have a mission and they have a purpose. I think the really, really good DJs identify that and they know what that is. Do you feel like you have an idea of what your mission or your purpose is as a DJ? Like every time you set out, when you go to do a party, whether it's Everyday People or you're booked to do somebody else's thing, what do you feel your mission is? And then what do you feel your purpose is? Because I feel like those are two different, or not necessarily purpose, not mission. What is your responsibility rather, as compared to what your purpose is as a DJ?
Well, I think my responsibility is to make sure that the people that come hear me go through that range of emotions that people experience when it comes to music, right? We said earlier, music makes you feel a bunch of different things. whether you're singing along to Before I Let Go, or like, you're twerking to Jersey Club, or people have all these different pockets of energies. And my responsibility, I think, is if they hit all of those pockets, by the time my set is done, they were like, wow, yeah, MoMA took us through the whole range of everything. Like, I just felt like we went on a journey together,
Right.
And a lot of times that journey, the peak, the top of the arc, is the big hip hop of the moment,
Yeah.
That's the peak of the arc. It's the Pop Smoke, that's Drake, whatever you need. Because if they feel like, nah, yo, I was ratchet, I sang my heart out, I danced to African music, you know what I'm saying? I wind my waist to soca. Like, I did it all. I went through all these different countries, but I never really left the room. Then I know they're gonna have a good time. And then I know that whomever booked me, even though for the past few years I most predominantly do my own parties, but I still get booked. I know whoever booked me is gonna walk away like, he did something that was different. And that's kind of like, I feel like it's my responsibility. Give the people all the range of the emotions that you get through music, and then whoever booked me, that they can be like, that was different and it was good. It's got to be those two,
Right.
Right. And then as far as my purpose as a DJ, I mean, there's a party that I do every Wednesday with Ellie. It's called Dance 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 at Lebain. That's the spiritual zone.
Okay.
That's the spiritual zone. That's like, we pull up with our USB sticks, music that's been downloaded in the past hour,
Right.
or our own edits, remixes that we made, and we just get in the zone. It's deep, it's soulful, it's Afro house, it's Afro beats, it's South African house, it's R&B classics. And I think my purpose as a DJ is when I'm in that zone, where I think really only DJs can get in, or artists who make music. When I'm in that zone, if I can bring a small portion of the crowd with me, I would have did good. And that happens Wednesdays at Lebain. Like, it gets deep, it gets spiritual. We go after hours sometimes. I don't want to get people in trouble, but we're there at like 4:30, 4:45 in the morning. And, we go to these places where, and that's the most amazing feeling. There's really a vast majority of parties where I feel like I'm providing the music and you're experiencing it. But if I can get in that zone where we're both experiencing and we're both providing the vibes with the dancers, with the community, that's just magical. And that was happening for the past few years at Lebain, and I hope it can pick up again soon,
Yeah, I've definitely been in a couple of those, and it's very, very much a spiritual experience. Like, watching those dancers, it's very a throwback to our heritage, to Africa, to those ceremonies, whatever is going on, and how dance is how we communicate. And you just watch
it's a
it.
ritual.
So ritual. You see the dance circles. The music is 9 times out of 10 something that you've never heard before.
Never heard, yeah.
But people are there to connect to the music. And that's kind of how, regardless of where I am, it's how I approach it. Whether you know the music, whether you don't, I inject my spiritual being and my energy into what I'm playing, because the music has its own spirit. Because I always say, like, me, you, it could be me, you, DJ Envy, Self, SNS, Parlay, and MOS. We can all play Annie Up by MOP and get completely different responses from the same song. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that is because of the spirit that we kind of mesh in with the spirit of the song and how we deliver it. So that's how I approach it with everything. So, but what have you been working on in this pandemic? What has the pandemic allowed you to kind of like focus on moving forward when we get on the other side of this, for you to be able to really take advantage and do some dope things?
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, making music, producing music, that's something that I've been dabbling with for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
but never been really able to commit fully
Mm-hmm.
because of, it's a tremendous blessing. The parties were doing so well, and then
Right.
eventually they were doing well throughout the country. And then eventually, we do 50 or 60 everyday peoples a year. Like, that's more than there's weeks in the year. So sometimes you
Right.
do everyday people on a Saturday in LA, and then do it Sunday in Oakland, and and we just keep it pushing.
Mm-hmm.
But what that meant was that I didn't have enough time to devote to music. And I don't care what anyone says, music is a full-time job. There's no
It
like,
is.
oh, I just make music on the side. Nah, man, you got to devote 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Like these guys are in the studio, they grind, you know what I'm saying? And I wasn't able to devote that to the music. And I've been able to do that this year because I've gotten, all my time back, as most of
Right.
us have. So while I was in South Africa, I worked on music for 3 months straight.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I went to Zanzibar, I kept on working for about a month and a half. And I've put out an EP,
Okay.
which is, it's called MoMa Piano, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a play on words on, that South African genre du jour, which is called Amapiano.
Okay.
It's kind of like slow house meets Afro beats,
Mm-hmm.
about a
Okay.
110 to 115 BPM, jazzy chords, soulful vocals. So I did I did an EP of that, and I did, a handful of remixes, official remixes that have been coming out every month.
Okay.
So for me, I guess that's the silver lining, right? The
Mm-hmm.
silver lining out of this whole pandemic is that I was really able to give music a concerted effort. And I'm happy that I like what I did. I'm happy that people are responding to it well, because it's given me confidence and motivation to keep going. For next year, uh, my aim is to not step back from everyday people, but to stop running the whole thing. People don't know I pretty much run everyday people. Because you know what I do
Mm-hmm.
with the parties, but throughout the years, I've always kind of just positioned myself as a DJ, right? To the point where people will come to me and they would be like, "How do you keep getting all these everyday people bookings?" And I was like, "I don't know. I guess they just fuck with me." Um,
Right.
but for next year, the team is so solid between Maine and Sinclair, and Sada obviously is still there. She's like the chief
Mm-hmm.
innovation officer, always coming up with new ideas and
Right.
brilliant concepts. Um, but I really just next year I kind of want to be more of just a DJ, so that uh, everyday people's all grown up. It's time for me to, and I don't want to sound too much like a capitalist, but start focusing on the next business.
Yeah. No.
And
No.
though
You
and
should.
though and though music is a passion, for it to sustain itself, it has to become a business. You have to treat it like a business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I've been able to like firmly plant my feet in this year. And I've also recorded a few virtual DJ sets for festivals.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I wasn't really part of the whole like live stream revolution that happened this year,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because in South Africa, I didn't have DJ equipment and my Wi-Fi wasn't that good.
Okay.
And then by the time I got to Zanzibar, uh, I found DJ equipment over there. I fell in love with the Pioneer SRT 1000 controller. I
Okay.
never thought I'd be a controller guy, but that
Right.
controller is amazing, right? So I fell in love with it. Somebody let me rent it for a couple months,
Mm-hmm.
and but in Zanzibar, my Wi-Fi was even worse.
Ah.
So basically, for like a good 4 or 5 months, I was just turning down live streams because I was like, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna look bad. You're gonna look bad, and the whole shit's gonna look crazy, right?
Right. Right.
But a couple of festivals hit me up, namely, Major Lazer, when they
Mm-hmm.
had their Major Lazer Carnival on Twitch a few weeks ago. They wanted a set, and it was all pre-recorded. And I'm like, word, pre-recorded, I can fuck with that.
Right.
So we got a couple of the homies. They set up a Canon camera, a GoPro, and they had a drone too.
Mm.
So I DJ'd a 1 hour set. Then I sent it to my boy DJ Crooked, whom you know very well
Yeah.
from Vegas.
Yeah.
Um, Crooked put together the edit. It aired on Major Lazer's Twitch during the carnival, which was a whole day thing, and the response was overwhelming, you know? Then I threw it up on my Instagram, threw it up on my YouTube, and I was like, you know what? I kind of like this. It's not, obviously, it's a lot more work than a live stream. But to me, a live stream is kind of like a DJ set at a party. It kind of happened. A tree fell in the ocean. If you were there, you heard it, right? And then it's over.
Right.
But the pre-recorded sets are like mixtapes.
They are.
You know?
They are.
So I'm approaching them with that kind of, because I'm like, they can live forever.
I have at least 3 months worth of live stream sets.
I think that even after the pandemic, people are going to be at home, and a lot of people, instead of just playing a Spotify playlist, are going to be on YouTube watching live DJ sets.
No, I think the best thing that's happened for DJs anyway in this pandemic is that we kind of got our respect back, right? Because I tell people this, like, you know what I'm saying? It's easy. You can be a shitty DJ and you can get away with it in a club, especially in big clubs like in Vegas, because there's so many distractions, you know, whether it's the confetti and the smoke machine and all this liquor and chasing women or women chasing dudes. Like, it's all these distractions, right? Things that have nothing to do with the talent. But when you go live, it's just me and you. Like, that's it. And you either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it, you won't be able to keep the people. So on this show, it's called The Loop. And so I have 2 questions that I ask everyone at the end. And it's always a top 5, because, you know, what's a cultural conversation without top 5? And it's always catered. It's always catered to, you know, what my guest does specifically. And then I asked them another question, you know, playing on the term The Loop. So we'll get to the top 5 first. So who are your top 5 DJs of all time?
I'm going to go with the people who influenced me, because there's so many quality DJs. I think, like, I'm going to leave my contemporaries out of it. Okay. You know, there's some of my contemporaries, like, you know, Eli Escobar, DJ Crooked, who rightfully I could list as my top 5 DJs of all time. But I'm going to stick to the legends that influenced me. And, you know, in no particular order, for a variety of different reasons. Tony Humphries, obviously, you know, Kiss FM, Zanzibar, the club in Jersey, not the country that I just came back from. And I met him a couple of times, extremely humble. To me, maybe the most soulful DJ of all time. Okay. But with that dance floor pulse, you know what I mean? Love Tony Humphries. DJ Goldfinger.
Goldfinger is such a monster, yo.
DJ Goldfinger, like, everything that I do is kind of influenced by him. You know, obviously I play a lot of R&B, I play a lot of sing along, but he was the guy that had everybody singing the Shaka Khan, and in the same night, you know, everybody going, wild out, wild out. And I was like, I'm experiencing so many emotions listening to this guy, you know, Goldfinger. And then I just loved his, like, his demeanor. He was so focused, so serious, you know, like, he was like, I'm not here to play games. I am not here to play games.
Yeah,
you know?
that's gold.
I'm going to give you these hits.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm going to give you these hits. Right. Yeah. And although he's a guy who can, like, cut and do all types of fancy effects and all of that, he's more like simplicity. That's something that I learned a lot from him, you know. Sometimes less is more. Like, when I first started, I was trying to blend absolutely everything. But now I listen to Goldie, I was like, wait, the way he dropped the shit on the one is just the way it's supposed to be dropped. Right. You know? Yeah. Not even a baby scratch or nothing. That's how you're supposed to drop it. Right. That's how the record was made. That's how it's supposed to hit you. So I learned a lot from him. And obviously he showcases his mixing skills and his cutting and all of that. But from him, song selection, you know, and timing, Goldie. I got to go with DJ Tony Touch. Okay. Because Tony, sometimes I look at Tony and I feel like me and him are fighting the same thankless battle in the sense that he's got a variety of parties. And I'm not putting myself on his level, but I just mean that I relate to him in the sense that Tony Touch will have him dance into the deepest house at Funk Box. We'll have people dance in a, South Soul disco, or have people dance into like salsa. And then he's got a radio show on satellite radio. I forgot which one. And yeah, he's playing French Montana. You know, he's playing ASAP Berg. And I was like, I don't know very many DJs who are keeping up with the latest Afro house, and deep house that's being released on TrackSource, right? As well as the latest 8-bar extended intro edits that are on the DJ like digital pools.
Like on BPM Supreme or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then obviously his game, his 90s and 80s hip hop is unrivaled, right?
Yeah.
That's Tony Touch, right?
Right.
And so I look at Tony and I'm like, Tony, you're a jack of all trades, just like me, And I feel like I'm a master of none of these genres, but I feel like there's very few people who know how to play all of them like me. And I think the master of it all is Tony.
Okay.
So we're up to 3.
That's 3, yeah.
I'm gonna have to go with Rich Medina.
Okay.
Rich Medina is one of the guys who in the early 2000s, he changed the New York City landscape, with his sound. When he brought Afro beats, like he was nasty with the hip hop, nasty with like the rare grooves, all the Dilla shit, the classics, really playing obscure music. But when he introduced Afro beats, I think he just really changed something in New York City culture. People weren't playing Fela like that before he did,
right?
And he became synonymous with Fela. So I think from going to APT all those Wednesday nights, and hearing him, I was just like, yeah, this guy's got his own sound. Sometimes he'd play a 10-minute record by Fela and go smoke a cigarette. And I was like, and I'm still here dancing. I'm still dancing.
Well,
Fela's upstairs smoking a cigarette.
Fela's good for that.
But I was like, you know what?
You can put on a Fela record and get on the line at the bathroom and be good, because Fela records is so long. So.
Facts. And he'd let the record play all the way up to the end, and we start clapping, and then he'd do like a house set. 30 minutes of flawlessly blended deep house. So I think for everything that he represented and still represents, I got to put Rich Medina in there. And then I think my number 5 is going to be a tie. And between DJ Spinna and Stretch Armstrong.
Okay.
Okay. Spinna, because he's just, what can we say about Spinna? He's one of the best DJs ever, right?
Ever. Yeah.
He can do it all. No one can ride a blend like DJ Spinna. On a fucking rotary mixer, like turntables are like 10 feet apart. You know what I'm saying?
And that's difficult. And that's difficult to do, especially when you're playing a lot of the music that he's playing, which is live instrumentation, meaning that it's not quantized. So for you to ride that blend for that long and then have that setup, it takes talent,
And he's a guy that I really look up to because, when I first heard Spinna, I heard him as a hip hop and dance hall, like a Brooklyn guy, it's like hip hop, R&B, dance hall. And then obviously sprinkle in the house, but then the house became more and more. And then he started producing more and more of those house records. You know what I mean? And then the Stevie Wonder parties and the Michael Jackson versus Prince, and the ability to just take people on a journey. I mean, the DJ Spinna is just, he's an artist like no other. And then Stretch, I think for his style, he's not really a microphone guy, kind of like me. So I think he perfected that whole cutting the music out so people can sing the lyrics and then he can slam something else in, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I would hear him do. And obviously a lot of New York DJs do that, but a lot
Yeah.
of New York DJs also use the mic. But I think his ability to get people to sing the words and then drop something else and just like hit you in the gut, like, oh,
Yeah.
nah, you didn't, Stretch. His timing is impeccable. Stretch, kind of like Goldie, impeccable timing, impeccable selection. And I think that's kind of what I like to, you know, focus on. If my
Okay.
timing is great, and I
Mm-hmm.
tell that to a lot of young DJs, say, listen, don't go too crazy with the effects, with the cuts. Work on your timing. Know how to count the bars, you know?
Timing is
And if your
important.
selection is good,
Mm-hmm.
if the next song always makes people forget about the previous song, then you're doing good.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all
No.
you got to do.
You're absolutely right. Those are that's an amazing top five. I used to go see Goldie every Saturday night at Etoile. There was a party.
E-Toil.
Etoile.
The girls from Queens are like, yo, we going to E-Toil? And I was like, Etoile.
Etoile. Yeah. We
French.
used to go there every Saturday night. And Goldie never. It was the first time I ever heard at a party Denise Williams and like
I know you, I live you.
yeah, let's hear it for
Right?
the boys. And this was a hip hop
Yeah.
party.
Party.
This is a
Yeah.
hip hop party, right? We're standing there, like, let's hear it for the boy. And it's like in the same party, like he's dropping Jeezy and all, and it's like, yo,
That's it.
it was like nuts. And it's so funny. You said something to me, and I wanted to let you finish, but I know who you are, and it's you being such a humble being. Fuck that shit. Put yourself on that level because you are on that level. We have respect for our OGs because of what they've done, but you are just as good as they are. And because it's art, it's so subjective. There's
Facts.
somebody that can look at you and think that you're better than all the people that you named, right? It's all subjective. But from a DJ to a DJ and someone who folks know me, I'm super critical, right? You're on that level. So now I want to get to the loop part. And so usually the loop question is kind of tied into the DJ thing, but since I view you such as such a valuable conduit in here in America anyway, when it comes to like the African culture and Afrobeat vibe and music and being a part of the people who are really like pushing it and getting it out there. If there was one, it's either a song or an artist or an album from the Afrobeat culture, and this can include Afro house as well. But you know that
Right.
that sound. What would it be that you would listen to on loop every day, all day? So it can either be an artist or a song or an album.
That one's easy for me to answer because last year, Crooked and the fellas from the Road podcast
Mm-hmm.
asked me to put together, you know, a top 10 album, songs, artists of the past decade, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so most of my Afrobeats, Nigerian Afrobeats knowledge is from the last decade, you know?
Right.
So that list is essentially for me as good as an all-time list. And the number one song I had on there was the Burna Boy song on the Beyonce Lion King album. He's got a song. Yeah, he's on one song. It's called Ja Ara E.
Yes.
And it's the one song where like Beyonce's not even on the song, and it's just him.
Mm-hmm.
And they produced the most amazing, soothing, groovy Afrobeat tune, spiritual Afrobeat tune ever. Like I put it right at the very top. Before that, I had Oju Alegba by Wizkid.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the one song that I was just like, it's never gonna get old.
Mm-hmm.
But when I heard Ja Ara E, and it's kind of like under the radar, it became a staple. I would play it every Wednesday night at the very end of the night, like after 4 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And it just became this spiritual thing. I listened to it. Spotify sent me my year-end thing, and it said, "This is the song you've listened to the most." And I was like, "That's accurate." And then Burna Boy, you know, he channels Fela, you know, with what he does with his voice,
mm-hmm.
with the lyrics. He often just takes like Fela hooks and kind of does
mm-hmm.
him over. and adds his own flavor to it. But yeah, that's the one. Burna Boy, Ja Arae.
I
It's on
feel
the
like that.
Beyonce Lion King.
I feel like that entire Lion King soundtrack is supremely underrated. It is some amazing music on there, but that song in particular, I know what you're talking about. It's definitely one of the ones that I play often because I'm a dancey guy. Like there's some slower Afrobeat stuff that's hard for me to kind of get with, but I like the vibe, at least get a two-step on. My favorite Afrobeat to this point right now record is Dance by Techno.
Oh,
I
it's
dance.
fire.
We gonna dance. Like that
That's
song is just so soulful and so spiritual to me. And when it comes on, because for me, like, so people who know me, like my favorite song of all time is Nights by Billy Ocean. So
facts.
it's the instrumentation of dance, but also the lyrical content. Like it's kind of this swag, it's this kind of this low-key braggadocious swag thing. It's like, yo, if I dance, she gonna dance.
She gonna dance.
If I
If I move,
move, she gonna move.
she gonna move.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's that
Yeah.
thing, and it's like, oh, I love that. I play that song as often as I possibly can.
That's kind of like almost like the golden era of club Afro beats.
Mm.
2014, 2015.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when club Afro beats peaked. For the past few years, Afro beats has been more of like a radio thing. You know, you could tell the
Yeah.
way they make the music,
Mm-hmm.
slower tempos. It's songs like Davido Fall,
Mm-hmm.
Joanna, everything. There's a lot more ballads and all of that. But that era, when it was kind of just coming up from the underground and it hadn't
Mm-hmm.
really blown up in the UK yet, and Dubai, that's the point where all these guys became international artists. Man, there's some fire from that era, and I still play it. Even like when I was in Zanzibar, I was going through those crates. I was like, I haven't played this in 4 years, and did not skip a beat, man. The crowd was just going off. So
Mo, thank you so much, man, for taking time to sit down with me and being on the podcast. I've
a
told you
pleasure, bro.
before, and I appreciate your friendship, but I appreciate so much what you do for the culture, and how you approach DJing. You inspire me, you motivate me constantly. Like if I ever go and I catch one of your sets, I'm like, yo, I gotta go back and I gotta revisit my library. Like, I'm missing some joints. And how you approach it. I think we have some similarities, but I think you are definitely very unique in how you go about what you do. So I appreciate you.
100%, man. Appreciate you too, dog. And I will say this: our
Mhm.
number one similarities. We're the only two DJs I know who play Dirty Diana. Like we
Yes.
ran that record for like
Yes.
5 years straight. I
Yes.
suppose we could talk shop all night.
We could. No, I'm sure we could definitely talk all night. But so really quick, let folks know where they can find you, follow you online.
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at DJ MoMa. And I'm also on Spotify. My release, MoMa Piano, is on Spotify, DJ MoMa. And then currently my SoundCloud, my Bandcamp is also DJ MoMa, djmoma.bandcamp.com. But the only one that I think is slightly different is my my SoundCloud, MoMa NYC. A bunch of mixtapes on there, as well as a lot of my original production.
Follow the man. I guarantee you'll be better for it. You're gonna hear some dope. You're gonna hear some dope music, some dope mixing, and a different perspective, which I think is something we all need when it comes to DJs.
Appreciate that.
Folks, thank you so much again for tuning in to another episode of The Loop. I am your host, DJ CEO. Thanks to my guest, DJ MoMa. And always remember, stay in the loop. Till next time, all right? Peace.
Peace, peace.